pretty rare to see a film where critics and audiences are completely split. Usually there's a pretty stable curve of judgment, but then there's things like The Last Jedi or Transformers, and then, well, I mean, you clicked on the video, so then there's Pandorum. I've seen this movie get recommended to me a few times in the comments, especially in the videos where I talk about underrated movies, and after watching Pandorum, I can generally agree that yeah, this movie is pretty underrated. For those that don't know, Pandorum is a movie that was released back in 2009 about people on a spaceship where all hell breaks loose on board. Now, this isn't exactly a groundbreaking plot. This synopsis describes like 90% of the Alien movies, along with most other space horror films. So when I first turned this movie on, I figured I knew exactly what I was in for, some cheap Alien copy, and I would have been fine with that. But that's not exactly what Pandorum is. Judging by all the promotional pictures and posters, I figured this would be an extremely dark movie. Not really necessarily thematically, but just in terms of its color palette. So you can imagine my surprise when this movie had one of the most vibrant color palettes of any space horror movie I've ever seen. So in this video, I'm going to recap the events, give my analysis on the things I liked, didn't like, and so on, and then talk about how this movie has lived on, what the planned sequels for this movie could have been like, and even talks of a possible sequel all these years later. So shed off layers of gross dead skin, get caught up in what looks like a bunch of tubes trying to swallow you, and try to regain your memory as we head into the world of Pandorum. The movie opens up telling us exactly why we're in space. There's not enough resources, the population on Earth grew exponentially, and now there's a ship carrying a bunch of people. Then we zoom in and hear that Earth is done now, and the only remaining people are the ones on the ship. So we cut forward to an undetermined amount of time later, to a guy named Bauer coming out of hypersleep. He's been in there for a very long time, has no memory of previous events in his life or really who he is. He goes to wake up his lieutenant, who also has memory loss. They talk about how strange it is that nobody woke them up because there was supposed to be a team of people who did that and walked them through their shift to get to, well, wherever it is they're supposed to be going. The characters don't know yet. They find marks on the door to the bridge of the ship, but nobody else is there. And to top it all off, the power isn't working. So Bauer starts going through the air ducts, getting stuck and disoriented in all the tubing and wiring until he eventually falls down a shaft, finding a dead body at the bottom of it. So my first immediate thoughts were that this movie was very cheesy. The opening line,
"You're all that's left of us. Good luck."
And the overall movie just had the look of what I like to call the Resident Evil effect, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why that was, and then I saw that Paul W.S. Anderson was the producer of this movie, and it made a lot more sense. But one of the things that really stood out to me was just how bright this movie is. Like I said in the intro, the posters for this movie just make it seem like such a dark movie, but the stars in the sky and really everything afterwards just doesn't seem to be like what the movie this poster is promoting. Also, after watching through the movie, these posters don't even make all that much sense. Like all these tubes going through people, that never happens. The only thing that happens with all the tubes is what I already mentioned in the recap. But after finishing the movie, I really didn't like how this scene was placed here in the beginning. This is treated as a reveal much later on in the film for many reasons, and I feel like if you took this out and just opened the story with Bauer coming out of cryosleep, the story stays the same. We don't know what happened to Earth, we don't know that the people on the ship are the last ones remaining, and this reveal just would have hit way harder later on. However, the other thing that really stuck out to me was the production design. When there's CGI used in the film, it's fairly obvious, but a lot of this stuff was filmed on actual sets, and you can really see that. There's also some cool in-universe stuff, like this light shaver, the manual power crank, and throughout the entire film, the production design is really well done. So Bauer's communication with his superior Peyton gets cut out, but he makes it through the air ducts and out to the other side, thanks in part to one of his trusty glow sticks, to which he seems to have quite a few. Earlier in the film, he just dropped one down a hole just to see how far it would go. Anyways, he runs into another person trying to pry open the door. He calls out to her, but she runs away, so he follows, only to stumble upon another dead body, this one dangling in the air, attached to some pulley device. Suddenly, Bowers is attacked by this woman, and she demands that he take off his shoes, but this is interrupted when a bunch of growling comes from down the hall. The woman disappears again, so Bauer runs from these mysterious figures, and as they come closer down to the hall, we get a good look at these, alien, zombie, space orc-looking creatures. Bauer escapes to the vent and radios back to Peyton, telling him about the creatures. They then have a bit of luck remembering their past, not having anything to do with the creatures, but they remember that they're on board the ship the Elysium because there's no one left on Earth. This is a one-way ticket, and there's no going back. We see through a flashback of Bauer as a child, watching this probe touching down on another planet that is similar to Earth called Tanis. Peyton and Bauer talk about their wives and how they could possibly also be in cryosleep somewhere on the ship. Bauer then levels up and finds a strange, literal handgun, and continues on towards the reactor to restore power to the ship. They continue talking over the comms and talk about Pandorum, a space sickness that drove some guy crazy on another mission to the point that he sent all the pods out into space. We then see that somebody is following Bauer, and he comes across another hanging dead body. Perhaps he's stuck in some sort of time loop. Oh no, this guy is actually alive, and it's... wait a minute. Daryl? So this is your pretty typical horror sci-fi setup. It's Alien, it's Event Horizon, it's Cloverfield Paradox, it's Dead Space, right along with the mission to get the power online and finding upgrades as you go along. But what this movie really had going for it was this whole memory loss thing. That was the one thing that really stuck out to me, and it's definitely more important as the movie goes on. There was that, and then there was this sort of tease that, wow, maybe Bowers is in a time loop. Is there a time aspect to the storyline as well? Just for that to not be true. But Bowers even says, wait, I've been here before. And I think this is pretty clever writing to make the audience question what's actually going on. If the plot is changing into something drastically different, it puts us right in the shoes of the protagonist, and I thought that that was really well done. It's also here where we get the first wave of flashbacks and exposition, learning what Pandorum actually is, how it makes people go crazy and do crazy things, while also learning more about Bowers and his presumed wife, how she might be on board, and that gives him an extra motivation to keep going and keep learning what's going on. As the story continues and as the flashbacks keep coming, the story differs and changes accordingly. Norman Reedus plays this guy named Shepard, and he looks at Bauer, a member of the flight crew, and expects him to have all sorts of answers. He asks him if he's on the retraction crew, where the rest of his crew and his shuttle are, but Bauer really doesn't know what he's talking about. Shepard is disappointed that Bauer doesn't have any crew or shuttle, so as the creatures close in on them, Bauer takes Shepard's lead and starts following him. The creatures eventually find them. Bauer tries to fight them off with his trusty new handgun that seems to do absolutely nothing. And then Shepard gets killed. I guess this is what happens when Daryl doesn't have any plot armor. Bauer then gets saved by a man named Mon, but he's Vietnamese and they don't speak the same language. Bauer tells him to stay put, and he continues on towards the reactor, and he gets attacked by the woman from earlier. Mon didn't listen to Bauer and comes to his rescue for a second time, but after an inspiring speech by Bauer, the three decide to work together. And good thing too, because the creatures are on their trail. They stop at the end of the hallway while Nadia tries to open the door. She gets it open at the last second, and they see all the pods containing all sorts of different life forms from Earth. Some of the pods have stopped working, so not all life made it, and they discuss how they've probably been sleeping on the ship for far longer than they realize. So time for a funny story that all you Walking Dead fans probably already know, but back in the years when Walking Dead was in its prime, this photo would circulate around the internet claiming that this was Daryl's leaked death in the show, and to be fair, it looks pretty plausible. He's wearing black, tattered clothing, he's filthy looking, there's zombie hands reaching for him and his guts pouring out. This has all the telltale signs of being a death in The Walking Dead. And when I first saw this photo, it got me. It seemed very real, but then I learned that this was from, I don't know, some other movie. And as the years would go on, every so often this photo would resurface, and there would always be a few people in the comment section who believed it. So fast forward to now, I decide to watch this movie, having completely forgotten about this photo and what movie it came from, and I was genuinely shocked to see Norman Reedus in this movie. I don't know, just kind of crazy that all these years later, I finally watched the movie that this photo originated from by complete accident. Full circle moment for me. But anyways, this is the point in the story where the ragtag group of people band together. Would have been cool for Norman Reedus to also be part of this group rather than dying like 2 minutes after he's introduced, but whatever. Seeing the silo of life forms gives additional motivation and reasoning behind this journey. It's not just for the characters, it's not for the possibility of seeing their wives, but it's for the fate of all humanity and life forms on Earth. We also get to see the characters get something that was in the back of my mind for sure, and that's how long they were really asleep. Peyton wakes up with a nosebleed for some reason and finds another member of the flight crew, this guy named Gallo, who came from the bridge and was also in the opening of the film. Peyton talks to him, a bit skeptical about having him around, especially when he hears that Gallo had to overtake the bridge because both of the other captains caught a case of Pandorum, which is highly unlikely. Meanwhile, the group continues along the ship, where they fall into a trap and into the most filthy, disgusting liquid I've ever seen, so skipping past that, they get out of it and start fighting one of the space orcs. But this thing severely overpowers all three of them, and it takes all of them working their hardest just to be able to take out a single one of them, and then a whole bunch more arrive. But then they get distracted and start eating one of their own because
looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
Buying enough time for the core three to get away. They come across a new corridor and barricade the entrance, meeting a new guy who doesn't seem to be all there mentally, but he can cook, so they put up with it. They start talking about the creatures themselves and how they might actually be humans who evolved to withstand the conditions of the ship, rather than the planet they were supposed to land on. The deranged cook tells them a story. At the same time, Peyton hears a story from Gallo about what really happened on the ship. Earth was okay one day, and the next day all communications were lost because of some undetermined event. The cook tells them that there were 3 captains, but one stood amongst them by the end, waking the people on the ship, having his way with them to the point where he was considered king of the ship. But his story gets cut a bit short, because our characters start passing out from a trap that the cook set them up in. They wake up dangling upside down, learning that they're about to become what the cook cooks next. But Bauer convinces them to stop so that way he can go and save the ship, which by his estimation only has an hour left. The cook listens, and then Bauer contacts Peyton asking for directions to the reactor. The crew, along with the cannibal cook, continue onwards where Bauer has another flashback and realizes the girl he's been seeing in his flashes isn't his wife at all. It's just an old girlfriend who left him, so they're not together, and she's not on this ship. So at this point in the movie, the clues are all presented to us, and on subsequent viewings, it's enough to tell us everything, but on the first watch, it's a bit difficult to see how everything is connected. By this point in the film, I figured that Peyton had Pandorum. I mean, the movie's named after it, it's a deadly sickness, we see what it can do to people, and there's a lot of strange things going on in his storyline. He woke up with a random nosebleed, this Gallo guy seems ultra suspicious, but Peyton is just letting him continue his villainous monologue like he's not a threat. The chef also talks about what happened in the years following the opening scene. How one person stood out amongst them all, and at first I was questioning if he was talking about himself, but I also remembered this kid being there, so perhaps he was the supposed king of the ship, and I thought that all made sense, but I was just a bit off. We also get an answer as to what these creatures are. They're humans who evolved with the conditions of the ship, meaning that they must have been on board for far longer than they thought. But these things aren't aliens that attack the ship or anything like I initially thought, or I mean, I guess they could be. This is just what the characters guessed, and that's all the explanation we get, so I guess we just take it at face value. Peyton listens as Gallo tells him that they should release the pods, bloody nose and all, basically confirming he has Pandorum. He locks Gallo in a pod, and he talks cryptically about how the others won't like what he did. The core four get to the reactor, and it's of course where the hive of creatures rests. Bauer falls down and has to get himself back up, blending in with the creatures in order to get up, but the cannibal guy, of course, drops a flashlight and wakes the whole gang up. Mon runs as a distraction as the counter goes down, and Bauer fixes it just in time. Bauer and Nadia run away while Mon has a 1v1 against the head space orc. After a tough fight, he defeats it and comes across a child creature who they saw earlier, and Mon was very adamant that they should kill it. But now it seems Mon has had a change of heart. I mean, look at this thing. It's adorable. Oh, okay, never mind. Peyton and Gallo have a fight after he escapes the pod, and it seems they merge together as one after he's stabbed with the tranquilizer gun. Cannibal Guy then goes out to report to Peyton, who stabs him in the eye. And the big revelation comes out. Peyton is Gallo, and he's the one who turned against everybody on the bridge, and he's had Pandorum for a while, he just didn't remember it. Or did he? They also find out that they've been on Tanis the whole time. They just crashed underwater, and it's been 923 years. Bauer shoots the side of the ship and it breaks the ceiling for the water to come in. They get in an escape pod and eject to the surface using one final glow stick, making it out along with all the other escape pods. They launch to the surface with all the surviving people and stuff from Earth, making it to day one of Tanis. So there's definitely some debate when it comes to the character of Peyton/Gallo. Did he ever have memory loss? Was he still trying to do the right thing even though he had Pandorum? And what I believe to be true is that yes, he did have memory loss, but it wasn't nearly as bad as Bauer's was. We see Bauer's have layer upon layer of dead skin, while Peyton didn't have that much. Now at first I thought this was just a Dennis Quaid thing that he didn't want to put all this makeup on, but it's very much an intentional detail. We see the true Gallo at the end of the film, but all throughout, I very much believe that he was there to help, that he didn't completely remember who he was, and that he was just as much in the dark as Bowers and the audience were. Now as for the ending itself, it's actually a pretty happy ending. What I first thought was that all these creatures were getting in the pods and coming to the surface as well, now having a planet to take over, but it seems that wasn't the case whatsoever. And because this is the end of the story, we can assume that Tanis was great and that there were no issues whatsoever. But if there had been a sequel like there was supposed to be, because Pandorum was the first of a planned trilogy, what would it have been about? Now I could sit here and go over all sorts of things about the creatures on Tanis, the creatures in the sea on the Elysium, rebuilding humanity, and those are all things that this Facebook group called Fans for Pandorum Sequel have already talked about. Yes, this is a very real Facebook group that is still active to this very day. In fact, even the director of this movie is part of the group, and it has over 5,000 members. I almost guarantee that some of you in that group are watching this video. But Pandorum was never given a sequel for a few reasons. Number one being the box office. This movie did not do very well in terms of the box office. The critical reception also wasn't great, but if you make enough money, the critics don't matter whatsoever. But I feel like if there had been a Pandorum trilogy, it, oddly enough, might have been a little bit similar to the Maze Runner trilogy. Now hear me out, some of you might see where I'm going with this, others might not, but the Maze Runner trilogy is made up of 3 films that all feel and look drastically different from one another. The first was your pretty typical teenage dystopian movie, but the second was an apocalyptic western, and the third was a dystopian sci-fi movie. Pandorum could have followed this same structure. The first was a sci-fi spaceship horror, the second one could have taken place on Tanis with the green mountainous setting, and the third could have, I don't know, been a desert or something like that. But unfortunately, those days never came, and at this point in 2025, it seems like we'll never get a Pandorum sequel. However, with Hollywood's love at remaking things, I feel like Pandorum would be a great candidate for a remake. We're always seeing remakes of things that are universally beloved, so why not remake something that had all the right ideas, is underrated, and has an inherent fan base, and do it justice? This movie feels very early 2000s, thanks to Paul W.S. Anderson, but an updated movie that kept the same use of practical effects, had updated visuals and action sequences, a bigger role for Norman Reedus, and some accurate marketing could go a long ways towards giving Pandorum the treatment and respect it deserves. Fans for a Pandorum sequel? Try fans for a Pandorum remake, and you might get much further. So is Pandorum another underrated movie? Yes, it absolutely is. There's issues for sure, but I'm overall siding with the audience rather than the critics on this one. I'm giving Pandorum a 7 out of 10. What are your thoughts on the movie? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know any other underrated movies like this. Special thanks to my channel members, and I'll see you all in the next one.